Welcome to Jeff Sanders Films, and today we're going to deep dive and learn something crazy. Not really, it's just speed boosters, but I just wanted to say something exciting. What we're going to be looking into is which speed booster works best for the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. So basically, what a speed booster does is it takes like a full frame lens or even an APS-C sensor lens, and it makes it similar to what it is. So like if it was a 50mm lens, it would still look more like a 50mm lens, which is not what you would get if you were using a lens adapter, just a straight lens adapter into the camera where you get a 2x crop. So your 50mm would turn into a 100mm. And not only does it do that, it also gives you a stop of light. Because it's using magnification, it's actually able to increase the light output of that lens. So if you have a 1.8 lens, it can be more like a 1.2 or a 1.4, depending on the magnification of your speed booster. Do you got it? Kind of. I'm going to put a link down below in the description, and that's going to be linked to something that explains speed boosters and focal reducers a bit more in depth. Most people watching this, however, I feel pretty much know what a speed booster does, and they're more interested on which one is best. Which speed booster is best? Well, I have a bunch. This right here, this is the Canon, it's the EF to M4 and it's the Speed Booster XL, and it's the 0.64 times magnification. I also have the Viltrox right there, and that one is the Viltrox EF-M2. And make sure you get the M2 version of that, because the prior editions had issues with image quality and also the electronics. So make sure it's the EF-M2 if you're looking into the Viltrox. I also own two different versions of Zhongyi Lens Turbos. I've got one right here on this FD lens. And I also have a micro 4/3 lens in there. I wanted to get a micro 4/3 lens because I was kind of tired of adapting every micro 4/3 lens to EF and then putting it through the EF speed booster. And I wanted to see if I could just bypass the adapter. And that's sort of what brought on this entire tutorial, and we'll go into what the differences were and whether that was a good idea or not. Okay, let's talk about price. The Metabones Speed Booster XL, like I have, costs about $650 new, so it's a bit expensive, about the cost of a, nice to mid-range lens. And the Viltrox EF-M2, this guy right here, that one comes in, you can get it as low as $150, but as much as $219 on Amazon. So quite a bit cheaper, 3 times cheaper or so than the Metabones. And finally, we have the Zhongyi Lens Turbos, and this and that. Those are going to cost about $150 new. And so if you were to choose a winner here, obviously the Lens Turbo and the Viltrox would be the on the lower end here. But there's definitely more to it, and so let's keep going. Next, we're going to talk about something that's kind of important with these lenses other than the price tag. Are these lenses electronic, or are they only passive adapters? Electronic adapters are able to use like a modern lens, like for instance my Sigma 18-35. A electronic lens would be able to use that and use the aperture and use the focus and everything, because if you're using just a passive adapter, it's unable to use any computer functionality because there is none. So a passive adapter would pretty much only be useful on something like a vintage lens or like a Rokinon Cine DS, a lens that lets you adjust the apertures and the focus externally on the lens. You'd be able to use a passive adapter for that. So ideally, you want a speed booster or focal reducer that has both of these. So let's see which ones do. Now, obviously, the Metabones Speed Booster, at that high price point, yes, it does. It has all the internal components, and so that's an electronic adapter. You can use, like I said, the Sigma 18-35. You can pretty much use most all popular lenses on there. And up next is the Viltrox EF-M2, and that one also uses electronic adapters, and so that's also going to be used on all these lenses. Make sure you're using the correct firmware on the Viltrox or the Metabones, because sometimes you have a lens that doesn't work, but if you either downgrade or upgrade the firmware, it will work. So just check the forums for whatever lens you're using. It should work out right out the gate though. And finally, there's the lens turbos, the Zhongyi Lens Turbos. Now those ones actually are just passive adapters, so they're only good for vintage lenses or cine lenses, nothing with electronic components. So if you want to use modern lenses, you might just want to avoid that altogether. Next, we should probably talk about image quality. That's sort of the most important thing with these adapters. Ideally, if they're working correctly, you shouldn't notice them. Your lens should just work as the lens is supposed to and was intended, and not have any edge softness or just weird things that can happen using cheap glass or coatings or anything like that. Now the Metabones adapter practically looks perfect. I have had very little issues with this. My particular adapter is the XL 0.64 magnification, and so on a crop sensor lens, you might have some issues. Like on my Sigma lens, on the wider apertures, 18 to 22 millimeters, you get vignetting. And it's not the end of the world if you have a little bit of that, because you can just zoom in a little bit and it's taken care of. But the alternative, of course, is if you order the Metabones Speed Booster Ultra, which is a 0.71 magnification, so it's a little bit magnifying a little bit less there, and that would make it so your Sigma would work all the way through, and all your crop sensor lenses should generally work on that one. That's the one that you generally have, but the reason I don't have it is because the Speed Booster, the 0.64 one, is just the one I had, and I didn't want to get rid of it and buy a new one because it was so close, and really most of my lenses are full frame, so I really don't have an issue using that. But if you want one that does everything, go with the 0.71. As far as the Viltrox lens goes, with its image quality, I didn't have too many issues with it, except I did have where on wider lenses at open aperture, so like at a 1.4 on a Rokinon, there was a weird blooming effect that I could get, and unfortunately makes footage pretty unusable. However, I have been told that you can fix this issue with back focus, so just making an adjustment on the lens. You can do that with all of these speed boosters on the Metabones, on the Viltrox. And so I will have a link down below on how you would adapt it if this was a problem for you. As far as the Lens Turbo 2s go, I really haven't had any issues as far as apertures or sharpness or blooming effects or anything. However, I have had issues with these focal reducers, the biggest one being it is extremely prone to flares. And we're not talking about like a flare that you would get from a lens. No, we're talking about a flare that just sort of washes out the image and makes it pretty unusable. It's very ugly. And it does weird things to light. I assume it's something to do with the coating on the glass itself that it uses. And so, unfortunately, yeah, it hasn't worked very well. I also had some issues filming with that, with those flares and like the light hitting the sensor weird, because it caused some odd artifacts while I was filming a play rehearsal with my friend Dean Jones, and it made the footage look really odd. And yeah, unfortunately, can't really recommend it. Another thing that I'd like to talk about with these speed boosters is something I don't usually see in other reviews, and that's actually just like quality control. It's just something I don't hear about much, and you'll find out kind of why I'm talking about this. As far as the Metabones speed boosters go, I've owned 2 of them, and that's just 2 speed boosters, and none of them have given me any issues. I also have owned many adapters by them, and yet again, absolutely no quality issues, and have had nothing, parts breaking or anything like that. Just really solid adapters that work fine. I cannot say the same about the Viltrox EF-M2. I have ordered 2 of them, and both of them have made sounds. Let me see if I can get it to do it. Oh dear. Can you hear all that crap moving around in there? That has happened both both of the Viltrox focal reducers that I have ordered. And it's, you know, it's really odd that it would come that way. And I noticed when I, you know, the first one, it didn't work. I couldn't get anything to work with it. And the image even looked funny on it. I sent that one back. I got the second one back, and that's the one I just showed you where it's making all that sound. And I'll see if I can get this to show up on camera here. Do you see those pins? Sorry, I apologize about my camera here. That are kind of sticking, like stuck inside and sticking out kind of funny. Those essentially have made it so I can't even use an electronic lens on this. My Sigma doesn't even work. Now, that's a problem, of course, that I should have caught a little earlier, but unfortunately I had my Metabones Speed Booster, so I didn't check this before, and it went unnoticed, and so it sort of passed my return policy, but both of my Viltroxes have been kind of junk, so I know this isn't the same with everybody, and it's exclusive to me, but it is something I did want to mention here. And so it is, yeah, I'll admit it is bad on me a little bit for not addressing it and sending it in, but it happened twice, and so I'm kind of disappointed. As far as the Lens Turbo goes, at the cheap price point, that actually feels really sturdy, but this is probably due to it not having a bunch of electronic components in it. It's just, you know, glass and, you know, proper proportions and, you know, just sitting there solid. And so, you know, it's fine for what it does, but it also doesn't do as much as these other ones. So it's sturdy, it feels nice and snug when it's in there, so it works fine there. So which of these speed boosters do I recommend? Well, I'm sure you've probably guessed. It's the Metabones Speed Booster. That's the one that works the best of all these. In this case, money really does buy quality. In the future, this might not be the case. If Viltrox just, you know, and maybe they have upped their game a little bit. I think that they would be a good alternative, but until they get to that point, I really can't recommend them without mentioning these issues. So unfortunately, both the Lens Turbo 2 and the Viltrox just didn't perform as well as the Speed Booster. But I do have good news about this, and that is these Metabones Speed Boosters, the EF mounts, they are the most popular speed boosters being produced right now as far as Metabones goes. And so there are a lot of them on the market, which means you can pick them up used in very good condition for a lot lower than $650. How low do I generally see it? $450, $400. I've seen them go as low as, in my case, I bought the GH5 and it was just bundled with a Metabones Speed Booster, and I got it for $1,500 for both of them. So that's a good way to go if you want to go with it. Is that still too much money? Well, I get it. But I have another alternative, and that's what I did with my first Blackmagic Pocket camera, and that's that I used a different mount completely. I used a Nikon mount, and I just used a Nikon Sigma lens, and it's not passive, but Nikon cameras aren't required with that. You just adjust the aperture, twisting the speed booster itself, and so that worked great. And I sold mine for $200, and I'm pretty sure you can buy them for around that much, $200, $250. And so if you want to just go the Nikon route, which is a very popular mount as well, and Nikon lenses are very good, and all the third-party manufacturers make Nikon mounts, so if that suits you better, you know, you might want to go with that. So I hope this helps you as far as information goes about speed boosters on the Pocket 4K. If it did help you, please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting, and sharing this video would be great as well. My name is Jeff, and thank you for watching. Okay, we're still waiting for my ceiling fan to stop here. So basically, that's all that I'd like to say about. So that's pretty much it.